for it. It's also a test for us. We want to begin with a prayer, the prayer of the Synod that Pope Francis added to the Instrumentum Laboris. Each of you has the prayer on the table, hopefully in the appropriate language. And I will ask Sister Flores to help us display the prayer for the sisters who are connected online. So we will take a moment of silence to connect ourselves within and not digitally. And each one can read this prayer personally.
Mantén abiertos sus corazones a los grandes sueños y haz que estén atentos al bien de los hermanos. Bien, vamos empezando realmente ahora este encuentro.
We now begin this meeting. This will be the first one at UISG because, as most of you know, we have 7 religious among guests and experts attending the Synod for the Young. We've already planned for another meeting in October on the 29th on Monday to listen to the experience of the sisters who are participating to the Synod. So you're already invited. I think that the Instrumentum Laboris is a beautiful document, and the Pope gives us these 3 verbs, right? Recognize, interpret, and choose. I read the expectations of those participating to the registration on the registration forms, and most of the people have this steady axis, this pillar of accompaniment. How can we accompany young people? What do we need to change? What do we need to learn? And how are we going to get to know these young people? So we begin with the first question with our speakers. I will now speak English.
It's a great pleasure to have today here our sister, I say our because actually it's a huge friend of UISG, Sister Nathalie Becquart. She was the person in charge of the pastoral ministry within the Conference of Bishops in France for many years, but now she's about to start her sabbatical time, but before she will participate the synod. So thank you very much, Sister Nathalie, to be here. And it's another pleasure to have the special secretary of the synod, Father Giacomo Costa, a Jesuit Italian, but he will make the effort to speak foreigners' language. Thank you very much for your effort. And so thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I know that you are very busy next week. Everything will start and you can count on our prayers. So the first question, because I know that many are curious about that, how the synod will occur? I mean, what are the legal aspects of the synod? And, you know, also, are there some changes after the document, the recent document of the Pope?
Must be red. Okay. Is it okay? Okay. So first of all, I was saying good afternoon to all of you. I'm really very, very happy to be here with you in this first time in a streaming event. I hope that with Nathalie we can give good contents for this technological afternoon. So let's begin on the synod, how it will occur and who will participate. Maybe this first. You know, there are a certain amount of synodal fathers, most of them elected by bishop conferences and some of them named by the Pope himself. But there are two other groups which are very important as well, which are the observers. And it's very funny because they are not there to observe. It's a tricky name because they are meant to take part at the synod, to speak as well, to take part in big assemblies, to take part in small groups, which will animate the month. So the only thing they cannot do is to vote. So for this they are called observers, but actually they are participants, and among them there are many young people and some educators and formators. So there will be around 40. So the whole group is around 400, so it is 1/10 of observers. And the others are the experts. They will be 22 from all over the world. We are not going to speak. So even if they are experts, they are not speaking, but they will help us secretaries and the groups and who needs for advice. And they really will be engaged in trying to write down what they listen to. So it's a very important role, but they have to make this big effort to listen deeply to what is happening in order to make them the things going and the reflection go on. So these are two groups, and of course there will be other people helping, communicating, and also composing arguments if the bishop quarrel. There will be a group also helping with dispute this when they argue. Yes. So, and I was already saying that there will be different modality of working. There are essentially two: this general assembly in which each one has a 3-4 minutes input to give, because if you think 300 people, 4 minutes, it makes already a lot of time. So there is not a big space to intervene, but there will be always some free time in order that things are more moving and interesting. and small groups, more or less, no, a little bit bigger than what you are, groups of 10, 15, in which really the main work will be done, I guess, because they have to propose concretely points starting from the instrumentum laboris in order to re-elaborate it. So this will be the movement, and at the last day really will be all put together, and a document should appear which will be voted and approved. This is one of a new point. I don't know, maybe you can say it.
Yes, maybe you have heard that last week Pope Francis has released a new apostolic constitution about the synod. It's a very interesting document for the synod, and it's a kind of new vision, but not this new vision doesn't occur just now. It is also the fruit of the past synod, because this synod on youth is very much related to the two synods on family. So it's a way, you know. And the new vision of the synod is really a process of discernment. Of course, now, just 1 week before the beginning of the synod, on next Wednesday, we speak about an event, but we have to have a new mental design, that the synod is really a process. And the new constitution emphasizes very much the importance of the preparation. You know, this synod has been prepared during 2 years of listening to the youth, listening to the reality. And the key word of this constitution, I think, but Giacomo could say anything else. The key word is listening. And so I really think that this new constitution emphasizes the importance of listening all the people of God, the sensus fidelium, and especially the young people. And I think that with the presence of so many young people, well, it's only so maybe 30, at least some, but it's the first time that there are some youth inside the synod as auditor. So the main challenge for this next synod is to continue this process of listening the Holy Spirit through listening the youth and through listening each other. So that's one point. And maybe
on this, it's an important. Okay, an important point is what you were saying, because really we think, I was speaking about the participant at the synod, but in this new way of thinking the synods, the participant, okay, at this month will be this 400, but really we have many thousands of participants before, and we will have many participants after. So we really must think that the synod is not anymore a nice event 1 month in Rome, but it's really a church process. And we are all called to participate and to speak and to make observation. And in this sense, we have this questionnaire, this inquiry with 100,000 answers from young people. We had experts, we have the pre-synodal meeting, and each one could write to the secretary of the synod and say, I want to say this. And I assure that we took really a lot of time trying to listen to everyone. And also you can find quoted in the Instrumentum Laboris one little letter we received from France, from a disabled people, young boy, which was really touching and moving. And so he really contributed with his small letter to the Instrumentum Laboris. So it's a big change. We are maybe not ready to assume it, and so to take part and really believe, as people will say, really believe that you can say something, it's not something already organized and prepared. Really, there is a place for everyone. And also the new thing will be the post-synodal part. This is
Yes, maybe I would like to slowly, sorry, to talk about that, because the synod will not end at the end of October. It will be just a beginning or a new step, because this new constitution also emphasizes the importance of the reception of the synod as a process of inculturation, a process of receiving the synod orientations in each local church. And as we are here at UIHT with many religious sisters, but also brothers, it's interesting that in the new constitution, Pope Francis talked about the importance to listen everybody, all church organization, and so UISG is mentioned with USJ, the Organization for Men Religious. And I think that religious life has also has to be a strong actor of the synod and of the reception in all our local churches through our congregations. So we are just in a process with different steps.
yes, and in one word, we said the synod is really an opportunity to learn as a church to discern together, to make this path together. Synodos is walking together, and really it's the subject, family before and now youth, are very important, but also to learn how to listen, and then also to go further on, because listening is the starting point, but then you have to understand what you have listened and to make choices. And to learn this, it's really a big opportunity for the whole church.
And just one last point, the other main key word of this apostolic constitution and also of the synod is it is communion. You know, the process of the synod is for looking for a better communion. And so the main challenge of the synod and of the church today is how to be together, united in diversity. And maybe we could talk about it, about the importance of discovering the way in our very pluralistic world, multicultural, multi-religious, in a very plural church, how to be in communion together, and especially with the Pope, because the challenge of the synod is collegiality. And a change is that now the text at the end of the synod, if approved by everybody and approved by the Pope, can enter directly in the Pope magisterium. So it gives more importance to the synod. And because we are speaking about youth, I really think, and I have observed, especially through the experience of the pre-synod, but also in many events and many places with our youth generation, that maybe the gift of this young generation, as they grow in a plural world, for them, plurality is their place, you know. They grow in this global world with so many diversity. And so I really think that they can help the church to find the way of being united in diversity, because they are not afraid about diversity.
If you think really the 4 criteria of Evangelii Gaudium are really put into practice in this synod, when you see that the unity is the whole is more than the parts, that the conflict is not to be avoided but has to be also passed over. I don't know exactly the English translation. I'm trying to translate now, but then But the process is important, much more important than to occupy a place. So it's not 1 month in Rome, but it's a process, a church process. It's not avoiding conflict, but trying how to overcome and to be enriched by this diversity. And the polyedron, to have a polyedric church, not a spheric one in which each one thinks at the same way, but neither that each one has his own spirituality, his own vision of the world, and say, okay, I do my work with my people, and who cares about the rest? Instead, really trying to be together in differences. So it's really putting into practice Evangelii Gaudium, and it's a big, big opportunity for the whole church.
Thank you. Let's help us to listen, to learn from the young people. What are the main issues and challenges that came up from the online survey, from the questionnaire, from the meetings that you have held before? So help us to know this youth today.
Okay, some insights about this youth generation, what we have learned, what we have listened, and it is mainly what I will say is mainly connected to the first part of the Instrumentum Laboris, recognizing that means to understand, to listen, to read, and to understand the reality and the reality of the youth. Maybe the first point is we have to have in mind is that when the synod speak about youth, the synod speak about young people between 16 and 29. Okay, there are 1.8 billion in the world. That means around a quarter of the humanity. You know, and the first point when we speak about youth and the situation of the youth, it is to have in mind that it's very different according to the countries. In some countries, for instance, in France, those young people represent 16% of the population, you know. So in some countries, in the whole Europe, it's around 15%, but in many countries, it could go to 30% and even more. So it's not the same situation if you are young in an old country or you are young in a young country. Maybe other points are that nowadays, and I think that Giacomo will speak about that because it's a key point for him, we can observe a generational gap. Because we are in a changing world. Our world is changing very quickly with revolution of the digital revolution, and the youth are the first key changers, we can say, the first plunged into the new culture. The experiment to grow in a context of uncertainty and precariousness. When we speak about youth, we have to remind that many of them are unemployed, many suffers. You know, when you speak about migrants, most of them are youth. But what we can say, and I will let Giacomo speak after, most of them, they are seekers of meaning. Maybe they are not Catholic. They have problems with to be connected to institution in an institutional way, and that's the main challenge for the church today. But most of them, they have a spiritual quest. They have many questions because they live in a complex world, in a world with so many challenges, and they have many fears also. You can't speak about youth without speaking about their belongings. And so the Instrumentum Laboris the first thing when you speak about youth is the question of their family, their peers, their friends. They need to belong, especially today. Another key point, and it's very important for us in religious life to have that in mind, that nowadays they are very oriented to concrete action. You know, they learn by doing. They like to work with other young people. Usually in France, when I speak about this youth generation, I call them the co-generation, because they like to co-build activities with the other. They like to live in co-locations. They are on social networks. So the last point is that maybe the main challenge for them today is the question of choices. And I really think that's why the main topic of this synod is vocational discernment, because in this very globalized and plural world, there are so many opportunities, or through internet, through the media, they can see so many ways, they can do so many things that it's very difficult for them to choose, to make choices. And I think that it is really one of the key points and the key challenge of the youth today. And the other one, which is connected to this key point, it's the question, their main question is who I am, who I am going to be. It is a question of their identity. And nowadays we can say that they have, their identity is also plural, and they build their identity not only to apply some models, but mainly by experimentation. So the key words to understand youth today is experience, you know, learning by doing. They need to act, they need to experiment, and they discern through experimentation. But maybe Giacomo could say something about that.
You said many right and interesting things. Just to retake what you were offering me as a suggestion, this intergenerational difficulties and the incapacity of also of adults of being adults and assuming their role as adults, not only adults in the faith, but as adults, and not being worrying on being always young themselves, but taking an adult position. And this is really a big issue, and we were quite also worried seeing that the generation risk each one to make their own life without really crossing. And here is a big question for us, especially for adults, in order also to understand the language the young people speak. And we have a lot of stereotypes in our head, in the way we understand young people, which don't help. I heard one of my Jesuit brothers saying, oh, the young people today don't fight anymore, they are loose. But really, they will never fight. Maybe because he stayed in his 60s or 70s when he was young and young people were fighting. Now, why fighting? We have many other opportunities. If what you offer is not interesting, we just go to another proposal in another place. So, also, why fighting if there is not a real space for us? You take the whole place, so we go and we look for another place where to stay. So, really, we risk to have our categories, and this doesn't help to understand young people today. Let's take some also big issues which came out. For example, work and unemployment. This was really a big, big question coming out, and a desire for young people to contribute to the world in which they are, but they are very often set aside. So also regarding these questions, work and unemployment, really this new generation are, we could say, native precarious, not only because they don't have a very easy career to do, but also because their parents already had difficulties. And so they are born in a world where it's very difficult to imagine something which will, for example, work which you will have for the whole life, and also for effective relationships. They are born in a world where already it's usual that couple splits and that religious people leave and all these kind of things. So they are also precarious, native precarious in this way. And how does this affect their understanding of for the whole life, for an engagement which has a long, long period, the whole life. Really, our formation often are thought for a progressive path and going from junior 8 and then and over and over with a very regular process. But it's not how they live. They begin to work, then they go back home. They begin to be in a relationship, then they again go back. It's really another world in which everlasting have a completely different meaning if they can imagine something in a life everlasting. This to say that for work and for affective relationship, really we have to listen and to understand. It's our task to listen and understand, because they cannot imagine, it's really wild sometimes, they cannot imagine the world in which we were young. Really, no way. And also a desire of social justice, engagement, and special care for our common house. But again, their way of engaging and taking, participating are not the way in which we would expect them. So also in this, there are other possibility of participation. And so often we take their difference as a lack of will or not energy or whatever. Instead, what we have experienced in many times, I think you as well, there is a real desire and a force, and I'm sure that if something changes in the world, it's thanks also to this impulse and to this insights of young people, which we are now called to listen. And also, in this sense, recognizing is not only this a social analysis. I am sociologist, so I can speak against sociologists. So sociology is very, very important, but when it's important to be with the feet on the ground. So being able to read these changes, the change of the sense of belonging. There are many points we could speak which are really interesting. But then we have also to have a spiritual reading and recognizing from a spiritual way what is happening, because all these things touch us in depth, move us and call us. So we have to recognize not only what is happening, but what the Lord is saying to us through what is happening. So this recognizes is not a sociological step for what follows, but it's a deep spiritual movement step, which is not the last one, but must be really lived through. There are many things. I don't know if we have time, because I could really say many things also about what they asked us, the young people, relational church, a transparent church, an engaged church. I don't know, maybe you can say something about this.
Yes, maybe I will just give you an image that is a strong image for me, and maybe it could help you. When Giacomo was speaking about their world is no longer our world, I could give this image. Many years ago, maybe we were in a world of progress. Young people were thinking that they could have a better future than their parents. And we are now in Rome, with a solid ground. But the experience of young people today and of our world is now we are in a liquid world. Sociologists call that liquid society. And I give you the image of the sea, because maybe and it is the main challenge for the church and for maybe many institutions. How could we spread the good news, no longer in the campaign with a very solid ground, but moving on the sea with young people, because the experience is that there is no longer many things that are fixed and solid. Nobody knows what will be the future in 3 years, 5 years, with so many difficulties and so many change. It's the first time we have such a strong innovation, technological changes. So the existential experience, precariousness of precariousness, is this experience of a kind of fluidity, liquid world. And how could you make a long life commitment in this world of the sea, in this liquid world? But I really think that the church can help them to discern how to find your inner solidity on the sea. The name of that is the boat, and this is the first image for the church, to be in the church as a boat, and the faith can really be for them the unique solid ground. And so that's why the key question of the key issue, I think, for this synod, it's not only a synod for the youth, but for the world, for the future of the world, because young people are the first actors of the transformation of the world. They are very concerned about the future of the planet, and Laudato Si for me should be the main priority of our youth pastoral care nowadays.
And I can stress one point. I want really to make a big underline to what you were saying, because don't think that the synod is telling young people what they have to do. It's really a conversion of our communities. This is the main goal of a synod. It's really to convert our communities in order they can announce the gospel to the world, and especially to young people. And this calls us really to not say we have always done like that, which doesn't mean to throw away all the treasure the church has, but really to make this treasure available to everyone. This is, I think, our mission and what we want. We are here for that. You are from your countries in Rome for this, and we are all working, but it's very important that the synod is an opportunity for the whole church to find paths of conversion. So it's not telling young people, because they will do whatever they want in any case. This is true. But it's an opportunity to us, because we know we have something really important and precious to communicate to them. And in this sense also, discernment is part of the treasure of the church, and in a liquid world, as you were saying, is maybe even more important. I don't know if you know, you have ever listened to Steve Jobs' speech to a university. It was a very, very famous speech, and he was telling about his career, his works, and said, I did one thing, that I began with Apple when I was fired, Then I did another things, and then I was fired. So he said my life was like many dots, different dots, but he trusted that this dot could be unified. There were other problems about his speech. It was very individualistic and outside community. So I'm not really putting Steve Jobs as a model. This must be clear. But that we have really to help young people in the many experiences they do in different fields, in different situations, also with different religions or spiritualities, really to try to see that is putting together and listening to all these dots, something come out, which really is not the fruit only of their will, or we build our career, but it's something they are given. This is a vocation. It's not something you will, it's different, the career to vocation. And help them to recognize that all these things speak about you and call you to engage in one direction. In this sense, they can find out at the end that they can have a long life commitment because they tasted many tastes, many things, and they discover the deepest flower, the deepest taste in their lives. So at the end of this process, they are able to engage for this different taste. Not at the beginning. When we were young, you began to go to the parish and Azione Cattolica or whatever, and then little by little you had some work possibilities when you got married and etc. And your belongings was the starting point. You had faith to engage in the world from your starting point. Also Marxists or communists had their associations and did these things from a belonging. Said now the belonging is not the starting point, it's really making different experiences in also universities, not one place, they change university and Erasmus, whatever. All these kind of things, but discernment is helping them in the light of faith, of course, to put together all these experiences that they can feel the call which was in all these different things and maybe they didn't listen to before.
Thank you very much. It's really difficult to ask you a question because, it's interesting. There are a lot of things, but I want just to make sure that all of you can follow the translation. Are you okay? Florence, you can check with the people online. I hope that everybody is able to follow, because we have to move and
okay.
For the human rights
Also,
of our translators.
Sorry, at least for me, for our English, but I hope it's...
We are all foreigners. We have to understand each other. It doesn't matter. And for the human rights of our translators, I will invite you to speak a little bit slowly. I know that you have a lot of passion, and this is very important. While we move into French now, I just want to share that one of the things that struck me reading the Instrumentum Laboris is the capacity to focus on different problems of the youth in the world, because it's not the same thing if you were born in Nigeria or in New Zealand. So there are different issues, different challenges according with the culture and the country where you were born. So now I would like you, je vais changer la langue avec mon français.
I'm going to go into French. I would like to ask you something more about the accompaniment. The adults, we must learn to accompany the young person. What must we learn? What do they need from us? Well, as a matter of fact, there are two key words in the Instrumentum Laboris for this synod. The first one, we've already discussed it at length, Giacomo even wrote a book about that. You can read it in Italian, a book on discernment, specifically what the Pope says about discernment. And the second word that Patrizia just mentioned, which goes along with this, is accompaniment. As I said before, this synod continues in this line of Amoris Laetitia, which had presented this challenge and this key position for ministry today for the church to be in a position of accompaniment. The model for accompaniment is Jesus walking with the disciples from Emmaus. There's a beautiful chapter. For those who understand French, I invite you to discover this. We published this at the Bishops' Conference in France, a collection of all the synodal texts, the preliminary document, the previous document, Instrumentum Laboris, the summary of the French consultation. There's a beautiful chapter on the art of accompanying, because it is truly what young people ask for today, specifically of the church. They expressed their need for guidance, for mentors, for companions, a reference person. You cannot grow, you cannot build yourself and progress in life. That is how young people grow, with no projection models. What I mean, so what is a, a person who accompanies you? It is an older person in life and faith, and it's not like a professor who will tell you what to do from the height of his chair. It is a companion in humanity, walking alongside the young person, with him, listening to him from where he is, who will try to show him the path of life, but who is truly at the service of the young person's freedom. This is an essential point that we want to highlight, and the Pope insists on this. The challenge in accompanying young people, it is a challenge of the development of their inner freedom. I'm not making any drawings. You know that this synod is also going to occur in a historic context, in the context of the church, which in a time of abuses, and we know that most of sexual abuses come from abuse of power. So accompaniment is the art of accompanying the young person in this chaste relationship without putting your hand on the young person, without exerting power over him, but it is at the service of the path of the Holy Spirit to help the young person discern his path of life and what the Holy Spirit calls him to. It is true that young people truly expressed this need for accompaniment in this very complex world, where the paths are not given, where identities are built openly. We more than ever need accompaniment in this context. I will allow Giacomo to continue because he has many things to say about this. She says everything, so it's beautiful. So I just want to highlight, emphasize this point you just mentioned in the gratuitousness in accompaniment. This is essential. It truly is the path to come out of a clerical mentality and the mentality of abuse of power, and it is about living the gospel. So I think you've touched on a fundamental point. It is also interesting to explain accompaniment in different manners. There's a beautiful chapter saying that accompaniment is lived in different manners. In our minds, we have the model of the spiritual mother or father, not necessarily a priest or religious, but it is true that as we listen to the thousands of pages we received, we saw there are different people in these roles of accompaniment. It is not necessarily an individual accompaniment, There's also the accompaniment of communities which transmit something about this faith and the experience they have. So that is an important point. But there's also the accompaniment of formators, educators, teachers, the accompaniment from the family, the accompaniment that young people ask for as they read the signs of the times. How can we accompany them as they read what is currently happening in society? That is another type of accompaniment. Some people actually give support for this. As the director of a magazine of social issues, this is my mission, and sometimes young people to sometimes help people read the situation. There are different manners of accompanying, but it is also important, and I believe this is something we could discuss with many of you, the relation between accompaniment and announcement. We must not see these as two separate things. There's a spiritual accompaniment on the one hand, and on the other hand, a social and educational one, which should not discuss Jesus because we have to respect people, whereas in the spiritual one we could. But as a church, we must realize that all accompaniment has a dimension of announcement. It is based on faith that we accompany, and it is this faith, of course, we want to transmit through different processes or paths. But we cannot speak of human preparation and then announcement. I think it is kind of old school. There is an obsolete type of reasoning. The Pope often insists on our commitment for the poor as a part of the comprehensive mission of the Church, justice as a part of our mission. In this sense, the accompaniment of young people is not outside of our mission and the announcement of the gospel. On the contrary, that is where we can display our hope, our faith, and our charity through facts, not words. But the risk in our institutions, be those schools or others, is that we truly make a distinction. It is also true that communities and spiritual animation is called to not think of belonging as a community type of thing. We must also accept that there are processes which are not exactly those we could expect or foresee. There's also a process that needs to happen there. But I think that we are really touching on a fundamental core issue, which is the articulation between the fact of going out, stepping out, being where people want to be in their everyday life. That is where we can join them in schools, music, sports, the young people who are in difficult situations, migrants, unemployed, etc. But this is not humanization just like that. It truly is a place of announcement of the gospel, which can lead to a process of deepening and which is not beyond our evangelization. As we said before, the synod is also a place where we can discuss about conflicts. I think this is a rather delicate point, and different cultures see it differently, but it is very important to discuss these issues, to have words and to understand the richness found in every single perspective and not just assert mine is the correct one. We have to see that if we truly want to be near the young people, we need all these ways and different securities to be close and to announce the gospel by accompanying them in everyday life. A brief quote to close this chapter, well, not close it, but I'd like to quote number 121 of Instrumentum Laboris, which says that all young people, with no exception, are entitled to being accompanied in their lives. These are words from the young people from the pre-synod. We are not entirely aware yet that accompaniment, with all of this, with all these different ways of accompanying, with all these different understandings, it is not something that is simply reserved to the young people who are thinking about becoming a priest or a religious. On the contrary, the synod is giving us a meaning of this word, like something that is very broad, very young to this vocation, and very young. We have to be ready to accompany this path of discernment to what a good life will be for him, what he's called to by God. What I tell the young is ultimately your vocation is what will make you happy by making others happy. We can also say our vocation. Finding our vocation means to find your own place in society and in the church for those who are Christians. But the role of the church must not be limited to simply accompanying those who are baptized, the Catholic ones. No, the church has a richness in its tradition of accompaniment that needs to be offered to all because it is expected of the world today. And during the pre-synod, we heard this from a young person, an atheist, who expressed to the Pope his need for discernment and accompaniment. We must also say that the older ones, the adults, sometimes are afraid to accompany because it is always a risk. Accompanying does not mean to ensure that the young people repeat what we've done. There's a risk to not know, to not be capable of understanding today's culture, the digital world, etc. These are languages. We heard the churches rather retire, but the young people are more available even before, more than before. They're willing to be accompanied. We see it in many places, even when they are older. For us, it was about putting our parents out the door and distinguish ourselves. Rather, in a liquid world where nothing holds still, to have one person we can discuss things and to refer to is really important, a lot more than what we can sometimes imagine. So they are willing, and even more with their grandparents, the older ones. We have congregations of religious people who are quite elderly, and they say, what can we do with the young? And we say, no. They also seek to exchange, to share with the older generations, often because the middle generations are less available to be with them. This is a very important point. The other side is that in accompaniment, we must truly rediscover, for our sake as well, our vocational discernment, the vocational discernment of the apostles, the what we do in our ministries. This allows us to say concretely that, of course, there are truths, there's an understanding of the world and faith, but this becomes a call for each. It is not something abstract that we adhere to more or less, but this faith we have calls everyone to commit, to engage, to discover, and to be for the others. So whether we accompany migrants, well, there's a vocational dimension here because it's not just about feeding them, giving them a home and a shower, but it is to help them discover their contribution to the society that they have reached. As well as students, it is not about learning to be an engineer or who knows what. It's about making them discover why they studied so much and for whom. So there's a vocational dimension in teaching. All our activities have a vocational dimension, and we have to rediscover our call as adults to accompany. It is not something that is reserved. Of course, there are experts, educators, but this accompaniment, making room so that each one can show what contribution he or she can give. This is essential and must also question us. We should wonder, who are we really for? Is it to confirm our institutions, or is it to be available for something new among the young people? Thank you very much. I really think you've given us many elements, but I think let's take a break. What I mean to say is we're not leaving this room, but we'll have a language table. So my proposal is give you 10 minutes so you may share around your tables some reactions, feedback, comments, and then if you wish, you can share perhaps a question or a comment with us to then ultimately give the floor to our speakers so they can give us some more input some more elements to reflect. For the people who are following us at the in the room of Zoom, we ask them to take some time. We know that we not only have people online, but communities are listening to this same meeting altogether. So I think this is great to give 10 minutes so we all have the opportunity to reflect. For the people who are in Zoom, you have two options. You can write your questions on the chat and Florence will read them, or you can also ask to speak, because that too is an experiment. It's a test. You can speak, introducing yourselves briefly, where you're connected from. So with Florence on the chat, you can set up a direct intervention. We can see the people. I don't know whether we truly realize what we are experiencing right now. Some may be used to this, but for us, it is something new. We have brothers and sisters from all over the world who are listening to us. I don't see the numbers very clearly. Florence, can you give us the numbers? Can you tell us the numbers? They are 17 in English, 20 in French, and 60 in Spanish. Well, the majority in Spanish. Applause, please. Very good. We now take a 10-minute break and then we come back together.
So you have to tell them about
veramente il comunismo imbarazzante a volte. Sono identificate dal compito di we were fighting about being people take them away and remove them, but the cardinal, most of them are more than we were already. No, we didn't know, but we were ready to remove them. But then we looked at other even about
Español. What a silence. Vamos a empezar. Bueno, vamos a continuar en realidad. No te entiendo.
Okay, let us continue now with Florence's help. We're going to give the floor to some from the group from Zoom, Spanish, English, and French. One or two people who can say something, introducing themselves briefly, quickly, the congregation, their country. Lavinia, can you speak directly? Is there someone from the Spanish language who wants to speak? We hear you. Davinia? Davinia, you can speak. While we try to give the floor, perhaps Florence, you can read one or two questions from the chat while the groups prepare to share a question with us. The question from Davinia was, how can we specifically, concretely open paths for interculturality, before the interculturality in the call? Many times we withdraw in our schemes. A question from the Spanish group. One question from the English-speaking group. The English-speaking group.
What you said about the accompaniment of the youth, and there is one question, and I will try to ask Bern to speak. If you want to ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you. This is Sister Margaret from Sydney, Australia, where it's just after midnight. What I wanted to know was, would you make some suggestions about the next age group, the 30 to early 40s? It seems to me that they have missed out and appear lost to our faith communities. Also, for those who are part of our communities, how might we invite them to accompany the 16 to 29-year group, since they're close to them as near peers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Intentamos otra pregunta del grupo.
Let's try another question. No, thank you, Florence. To then give the floor to our speakers, do the groups want to share a comment or a question? You can announce your language, and then you press this button to speak. Does anyone want to say something? A comment, a question, very easily, simply? My name is Blanca. We've shared here. Can you hear me? My name is Blanca. We've been sharing in our group what this meeting has inspired We said that as adults, sometimes it is difficult for us to understand young people. As you've said, sometimes we criticize, we are strict, we're rigid, it's difficult. Another thing we were highlighting was the importance of being a reference for young people, how young people need to see in us that reference. And another thing, we are expecting responses from the synod to our questions as well. This is the expectation. What we were saying here was that this questions us a lot, but there are questions but very few answers in this liquid society and in the way we perceive the world and how the young people perceive it. We also said that it is a challenge for us to accompany, but we were talking about how the families also accompany, how the parents accompany, or how we can also exercise that task of accompaniment, not only for young people, but also for the families, because it is also difficult for parents to play this role. I don't know if the other companions want to add something to supplement this. I was in this group, so I shared this reflection, but I would also like to say something from a more personal perspective. I appreciate this reflection. It seems very well structured, very well organized, and it reflects the knowledge of the people who've been presenting it, which is what is a reality. For us, it is an opportunity to reflect. I want to underline some aspects. One, for example, the issue of precariousness in the young people. The other one is about the liquid society they belong to and the issue of accompaniment. About precariousness, this always gives us a sense of insecurity, perhaps unconsciously, but it does give us some insecurity. The liquid society, yes, a liquid, physical, so if there's no container, the liquid gets lost. So we need, perhaps this is an opportunity to, based on the solidity of the rock of our faith, our church that is founded on faith, it is a beautiful moment to offer a container to young people to hold their concerns, their human concerns. Sometimes these concerns are very pure. They even stem from this confusion, this chaos, where we seem to be swimming as we come across each other in this ocean. So yes, it is an opportunity to welcome young people, to offer a space for acceptance as a church. Perhaps it can be the only institution, I don't like to call it this way, but perhaps the only community, the only home where we can open our doors. And another point is accompaniment. I think the father said it. Sometimes we're a little afraid, but as we read these documents and all the documents that have been issued during these long years of preparation, and especially this document after the youth meeting held in March, young people are seeking reference points. They're looking for people to accompany because they themselves in this liquidity are feel with their feet in quicksand, on quicksand. So I think that it is a very beautiful challenge for the church. We welcome this process. We have been through all the different methodology that's been applied, and I really await this synod with much excitement, hope, and prayer, of course. And I also think that, yes, we are expecting responses, but certainly there will not be a magic recipe for everyone. We'll have to contextualize all this in our realities, in our local churches, religious communities. But from there, as St. Francis said, we have to do our part. We have to do what our role, play a role in that context. So I just wanted to thank you for everything you've said. Thank you, Spanish group.
We were beginning to talk about the question of the tension that exists today between this liquid, very open society. Yes, the microphone is on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The tension between this very open, very liquid society with no boundaries, no borders, and the opposite phenomenon that we see of fundamentalism, of a return to a search for a very strong and clearly defined identity, and how perhaps we can help guide young people through these two very opposing choices that they're faced with. And then a more technical question about the synod itself. You mentioned that there are the 40 or so observers, and it's great to see that in the new constitution there is the possibility for those who are not bishops, the non-ordained people, to be able to vote. But it seems that that is only a privilege that is given to the men who are non-ordained. And I'm wondering, perhaps, Sister Nathalie, if you would like to comment on whether it's a problem. It's great, I know that the women are all part of the conversation. It's important to be heard in the working groups and so on. But is it a problem not to be there at the final hurdle, if you like? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Filippa. And I would like to hear something from the French group. Or we have two French groups, if I'm not mistaken. Just a comment or a question, but
No, we didn't say anything particular. We just commented what we liked. We really have no specific question to ask. I specifically, what I recognize, what I identified with the difficulties of the young people, what we worked on with young people. So I rejoiced. This made me happy. Thank you. I would like to give the floor in English, or I think you can do it in French. He can do it in English. Okay, you, Nathalie. I will speak French as requested. I'm not going to answer every single question. I'm going to extract a few points. With regard to accompaniment, I'd like to express perhaps this image of church that we are invited to, which the Instrumentum Laboris is already outlining in the third part, at number 141. At 141, we speak about what we call generative church in English, a church that generates. I think that this model of church that is increasingly invited to develop this figure of accompaniment at the service of vocation discernment, that is to discern a unique path of life for each. This is a model of a church that generates for life, and a church, as we said, and that the young promote, a relational church. The accompaniment is always at the heart of a relation. We see in today's world is structured in a more horizontal manner. That's why I do not like to speak on a platform or something, because today we are in a communication modality that is horizontal, that is sharing. The key word for young people is sharing. If you like something on social media, you share it. So what we have to rediscover is that we have to hold our places as adults, as seniors in faith, however, in a dynamic that where we have to receive from the young more than give to them. So this is also a model of a church in which nobody can see oneself without the other. There's a beautiful paragraph that emphasizes the reciprocity of vocations. I think it is very important. And I think that one of the key points for youth ministry today is the teamwork, collaboration. It's great that we are speaking here in a pair, and I think that we have to develop these models in the church, these models of working in teams, collaborating, partnership in a plural team, men and women. Of course, this is the main structural difference, and you're right, and I'll go back to that issue. One of the strong questions we received from the young people, because they are growing up in a world where relations among men and women have changed. We are more on equal terms. There's still some work to do, but there's a new position of the woman in society, which also has an impact on the church. So when we speak about men, of course, the issue about women arises very quickly, and it was pinpointed by young people, but it's always a collaboration among vocations. During my 6 years at the direction for National Service for Young People and Vocations, in my experience, I could say nothing today. I was fed by my teamwork, and this team included priests, lay people, young people. The challenge is to give responsibility to young people. They are the first evangelizers for young people, and I hope that during the Seder we will insist on this notion of co-responsibility. In the breath of the spirit of Vatican II, we have to go further in this vision of an ecclesiology of communion, where we have to learn to work together. The dynamic, the pillar of charism of the church, and also the hierarchy. We have to work in a greater partnership. We have to get to know each other better, men, women, young, old, in this diversity of vocations. And I will contribute another point. I was very happy to see Sister Margaret from Sydney. As a matter of fact, there is a very important slogan that we increasingly repeat: faith grows when it is given. And we know that one of the key words, one of the key places for the growth of young people is when they have the experience of serving the others, specifically in the animation of younger people. We have beautiful experiences in France nowadays, specifically among the scouts, the Catholic scouts, that is very successful. There are young people of 18, 20, or 22 years old who are responsible for the younger ones. We are also developing this model in catechesis in many Catholic schools. The 16, 17-year-old students will teach catechism to the 12, 13-year-old. They are well accompanied. If they are well accompanied, these are extraordinary places for growth. Give them responsibility, trust them by supporting them on this path. And I would address one last point before I give the floor to Giacomo, who I'm sure will have something to contribute. As a matter of fact, in society nowadays, you have noted that in this liquid world, we see many young people who are at ease with this diversity, pluralism, this world that is moving, but we also see a movement that is asking for some verticality and solidity, while listening to young people, I understood that when you're at sea, you either travel on a boat, yes, but when you are on a boat, you need some lighthouses, you need some islands, you need to stop at some land. So we have this dual movement that is opposed. We have greater openness, but we see also with regard to migration a movement of closure, and we have to think together about these two movements. So one image that helps me, because we cannot deny these two movements in this church society, and we have to find a creative way to think about unity and to experience and to live together in this dual growth, this growth that takes two opposed directions. I am helped by a literary figure that I want to share with you. It is the figure of the oxymoron. Those who like poetry, this is a style where you put two opposed issues together and you go deep. It's the oxymoron. It is, we have to create a model of way of living together that is like the oxymoron, the black and white opposed, that will allow us to find a path of unity that does not exist in our pre-established ways. This is undoubtedly what the Pope issues through the polyhedric figure. It's another way of exploring. I really rely on this figure of the oxymoron to try to explain. We cannot be satisfied with denying. We have to find a way to keep things together.
We said 4 points. The first one is about being a reference for young people, point de repère. I think young people ask this quite strongly, but they ask us to be human references, not abstract references. And this means that they don't expect perfect men and women or perfect religious persons, but they expect people in order to witness the hope in their lives, so that they are fragile and in this sense closer to them, because if someone is too perfect, it's felt very far away, fragile, but living hope and faith in this fragility. And so this also demands us to risk to be ourselves when we are with young people, not to say, oh, they want models, so I must do and be a model. It doesn't work like that. We must live really and deeply our faith, and so we will become models and references from them. And the church had difficulties to live this, and we see all this non-transparent and abusive behavior was also to cover limits which maybe was better to declare and to accept, and in this sense to oppose and fight. As we wanted to be perfect, we did really a disaster. So we have really, and they are teaching us also to be, what does it mean to be a model, to be a reference from them. So this was the first point. The second point was already taken by Nathalie, this liquid society and fundamentalism as a possible reaction. Just to give another image, I was, how how to say, introducing on a book, a sociological inquiry in Milan about young migrants arrived, second generation, we would say, or families, foreign families in Italy leaving their faith. And it was clear that having passed through the sea, this liquid reality, was really opening two possibilities. One, to stay with a cultural vision of religion. The other one, to go in depth and discover their own personal way to live it, to make it a source of life. So these were the alternatives. And of course, this culture one brings also to a more fundamentalistic position, just to reaffirm their cultural diversity in which religion is part, or to discover that they are called to live the faith of their fathers, but in a new way, which is removed by this new situation in which these migrant young people are. I think it's a nice image to understand that with the same reality, there are different possibilities, and faith is always taking a risk. And but this doesn't mean to judge and to condemn the weakest maybe ones, which are needed to have more solid structures and more security in their lives. Again, it's really to try to understand why the one and the others, and try to go together on. It is also true that we were seeing the young people we had for the pre-synodal meeting. We are really used to live in a multicultural society. And also the way they speak about their faith must take into account this. So it's the existence of other religions. So this maybe in some Asian or African places were more obvious and less in a Western country. But now I think everywhere is the same, and they have to live it. Of course, also this has a risk of just adjusting things and said, okay, I believe like this, you believe like that, and we live in peace. So another risk is this individualism, liberal individualism, which is another, it's as dangerous as fundamentalism, I would say, or not life-bringing as fundamentalism. In this sense, really to be able to dialogue, it's a matter of faith, of risking your words and your opinion, and welcoming the others, and try not just to say, okay, you are like that, but we can enrich us mutually. There is a French, I always quote French in this case, the word reconnaissance, to recognize, which is together to accept that the other, the fact that the other is there, he's different from yourself. So I recognize that you are there and I'm here. But little by little, it's also to be grateful. Et reconnaissance means to be grateful for the others. So the way we have to do together is to pass from accepting that differences exist to be grateful that this difference exists and that together we can go over. So I think this is an important place. I've lost one important things about this, which was the dangers of this saying, okay, you are like that. For example, it's how little young people speak about human rights. So that each one has a right, okay, dignity, but human right, and which recognize at a stronger level each one, that is not, okay, you are there, but you have some rights, and we together have to respect this right of existing and living. This was clear also, again, from the migrant questions, because it was really calling the fact that young people said, we know that each person has his own dignity, but we really are not agreeing on how to welcome migrants in countries. So if already this is a question for young people, imagine for the older ones, really how concretely I recognize your dignity and how I recognize at the point that I say that you have the right to exist and to be in a different country from yours. So this is a very delicate issue, and I hope that young people, which is used to live in a world like that, can help us all. Third point, I also wanted to comment about the privilege of men. If I may, I should be quiet and just listen and learn. This is true, but just to say that I agree completely is unacceptable. And I've seen many also priests and religious fighting against this privilege of men, not all of men. So there is a lot of il y a de la route à faire. There are still work to do. But one major problem is surely clericalism. So this, and it's linked to power and how do we live to relate to power. This is really a main issue for the whole church, and is not only being men and women, because this, you see, we can cooperate, integrate, but there is a way of relating to power which must be taken into account. And I hope really that also the synod and young people help us to really move on from this being attached to power, which has one of the consequences, but it's not the only one, that men don't leave place to women, the proper place. So this is a very important issue, the clericalism we have in our communities, and really inside, we have it inside. So conversion and prayer. So nothing is impossible to God, luckily, because if not, we will be lost. Last point is about what we are waiting for, and the expectancies. How do you say in English? Expectations. So one nice thing is that really, I think all the synodal fathers and mothers and whatever come to the synod without having a solution. I have read all the bishop conferences document. There is no one nation, one continent said, we know how to do it, you must listen to us, we will teach you how to do. Nobody knows how to do and how to go on. So this is the first, and I think this also is a grace. It's a grace because this will oblige us really to look and to look together on how to go on. Second point, it's another interesting thing from the new document of the Pope, the Constitution, Apostolic Constitution, which is that if the Pope is not happy with what we do, he said, okay, you are renvoyé, postponed, and we will have another session because I'm not happy with what you have done. So if it will be poor, he will go like at school. No, you didn't achieve sufficiency, so you must do it again. And this is a new possibility, and I think is very wise because they have realized that Vatican II was a success also because it was section and pauses and section and pauses. So the things mature with time. So if we are not mature, it's useless to make a document and say, okay, young is okay, and now we go to the new topic. said, no, we are not still mature, so we have to wait more and to think more and to go deeper into our experiences. There are some very good experiences in all around the world, and we must understand better what God is asking us. So this is another point. So maybe it will not end in October, the synod. I don't know. Third thing, and it is my main aspect. Of course, there are so many topics and things which you have seen that I'm quite passionate. So this is not the issue. But I really hope that this synod and this session and all this process can really help us to rediscover the grace of dialogue among generations, that really young people have a place in the church that can they listen to, and not only in a youthly way, but really a serious place to participate, and others realize the richness of living them place, and to try, as I was saying, to be reconnaissant, to be graceful for the gift of young people in the church and in society. And so that it's not a question about young people, it's not a question about communities, adults, it's really how to dialogue together. And I really am sure and hopeful and more than expectation, I would say, that this can be a concrete step and the step we are called to.
Just one, sorry.
Yes.
No, just one word to say something also about my expectation after that. Two words for me. I really think that we have to think about this so important dialogue between generations as an intercultural dialogue. You know, it's the same kind. Intergenerational dialogue is a kind of intercultural dialogue. And the grace of synodality, the grace of the synod is to have people, bishops and auditor observers from all over the world. So it's a path. And the second word is, for me, it's a key point. This synod must go further into the synodal way. So the key word is synodality. This way to discern the call, to discern the path together. So I really hope that this synod, because synodality is the key for youth pastoral care and the key for the church today. And maybe it can also be a key to help our society to find this way to be together.
Español.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we have to interrupt. I know we're all tired. Do you resist 2 more minutes? Because I would like that, because Florence was telling me there are 2 sisters who want to ask questions. We're not going to answer them, but the questions are important, and we leave ourselves with these questions to continue reflecting. Anna in Italian, the question in English, and the Sisters of Mercy, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Anna.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good. Can you introduce briefly yourself? Briefly.
Okay, I'm Sister Anna from Milan in Italy, and I'm from Ursuline Sisters. I thank you for the speeches, and I'd like to thank also the sister who spoke about the possibility for Catholic women to vote at the Synod, and thank you, Father Giacomo, for the answer. I'm a member of a group who is advocating for that, so it's an issue I really care about. But the group is Women for the Church. But my question is another one, is about how can the accompaniment help young people who experiment, who is searching for an identity that is not already there, but that they are searching for. More specifically, how can we discern this difficulty for young people to engage in long-term commitment, be marriage or religious life or whatever. There's a way in which we can meet young people trying to read their attitude towards long-time engagements, and a way to read the positivity of this attitude, imagining different ways to consider this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think that the question that you raise is a key question that we are not able to answer right now. I'm very sorry, but we will keep it for the meeting October 29, because after the synod, we will be able to have more elements to reflect on that. So we are invite you again here for the October 29. So Florence, we also have the other question, or we can go? Okay, we can try. Oh, un grupito de hermanas.
A group of sisters. Beautiful. The sister who wanted to speak. Daughters of Our Lady of something. Well, we're going to bring this meeting to a close. As our first time, I think we can be very satisfied, right? Thank you very much to all the people who have followed us online. Thank you very much to all the people who have followed us online. We bring this to a close with good news. Florence, can you help me display the blog? Because based on the idea of Sister Nathalie, we have created a blog to collect all the experiences, the comments that the sisters, the religious sisters who are going to participate to the synod can leave their word here. Sisters' voice, la voix des religieuses, la voix de las religiosas. This is a very simple space. And if you click on the UISG website, you can reach this blog. We will be publishing videos, news, experiences, comments about the experience of the sisters. And Nathalie, I am sure, will be writing very often on that.
So, vamos a enviar a
We're going to send the address to all of you so you can follow this. We'll be posting things in different languages, whatever we have. We're not going to be translating. We are inaugurating this at this time, and we're very happy. As UISG, we have 3 representatives, Sister Sally, Sister Dominica, Sister Lucy, 3 different congregations. I'm not going to say the number of the religious form anymore. We're not going to be controversial here and arguing. We're not going to argue. There will be other sisters. There's a total of 7. There's 1 expert and 6 guests. So we're going to pray for the entire synod and particularly for the contribution that our sisters can give. So thank you very much, Giacomo. Thank you very much.